All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Recovery Rebellion. My name is Tara Grace. I go by Burn the Stigma on social media, and today I am with Gil Gibbs. I noticed Gil, I want to say it was the beginning of the summer. I think someone originally sent me one of your videos or something, and I was like, oh shit, this guy gets it, because there are lots of people who talk about 12-step and kind of shit on 12, but there is a difference between having a couple of people who give you some trash in the comments who happen to be 12-steppers than to have actually had this presented to you as the solution of what's going to save your life. And for some of us, I don't know what your experience is, but for me, it ended up being a very traumatic experience. Like, I had to recover from recovery after going through it. Especially early 20s, being told that I have this progressive deadly disease that I'm going to have for the rest of my life was kind of like, oh shit. So let's just get right into it. What brought you to your very first AA meeting, if you can remember?
I can absolutely remember. I remember being, it was introduced in treatment. So like I had overdosed and, like it being a part of treatment, which is like one of my biggest beefs with it today. Because I was 20 years old, like early 20s, like it really wasn't much of an option or a choice. I mean, surely it was like you could try to, but I mean, it it didn't work out. And so I I fell in love with it. Like it was presented as the only option, and there wasn't like any other alternative. It was like this, or like you're just cooked. And I was like, okay. And so you go full swing into it, and was a full practicing member of that program, like on every single level. From like doing the area meetings to having multiple home groups to H&Is everywhere and it almost becomes a part of your identity, or it is a part of your identity at that point. And then also started working in substance abuse and mental health as well. And so my entire life then like kind of revolved around it. So when I started seeing things over time like become objectionable and questionable, it took a minute because I was like, oh, it's an individual. But you say that a dozen times, that's a pattern now, right? So it's like, is it really? And it was really hard to like deconstruct the identity that I had built around the rooms and around recovery. And because that's like that's all I had. I mean, I was 20 years old. That's like what I was given. That's all I always had. Like, it definitely wasn't an easy time, deconstructing that. And then as you start to, you're like, okay, shit, then what? And I like how you put it, like recovering from recovery. Like the last like year or so, it's like that's what it's been. It's like trying to find like my footing again in reality, like away from this toxic culture that is very pervasive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for me, like when I started to question things, I'm like, that's my disease. My disease is trying to get me to think that this is bullshit and, my own thinking, because I was taught I can't trust my thinking, right? It's first thought wrong. You're literally taught to not trust yourself. So it's like when you start to have these thoughts about maybe there is something else. Maybe I could try doing it another way. It's like, nope, that's that voice, that's that disease that's trying to take you back out. What was there like a first, was it subtle, things kind of piling up, or was there one big experience? I'm kind of jumping ahead, but was there one big experience that just made you say like, I'm done?
It started out progressive. Like it was like 2020 that like the veil had begun to get chipped away. Things just started like lining up. Like my pattern recognition started looking up on a lot of different things, and I'm like, this doesn't feel like it's like just these individuals, or it's just like me. Because again, like the victim blaming and the way they turn things, if you're resentful, it's like, oh, you're doing something wrong. Not that there could possibly be like it couldn't possibly be a reflection of the environment, right? Like God forbid that was actually like an acceptable response. And so initially it was gradual, and then there was like two big events. There was one like my best friend and like my business partner passed away. And there was a lot of things tied to that. I think started like doing California sober, or like whatever else, but didn't feel like he could open up about it. Had he probably been able to, things might have like went differently. But it was the response thereafter, because I was at this point very well integrated in the community. Zero support, right, from these people that say they care. And it was one of the biggest highlights in the discrepancy of like what people say they do and like all these principles that they want to preach and practice, but it not happening even a little bit. And so that was like one of the bigger like chinks in the entire armor. And then like from there on out, like I viewed the entire process with a much more critical eye and use my discernment a lot more. And if you just sit down and listen, you're like, it was like almost like I had like broken a spell and like I was just hearing shit for real. I was like, this sounds nuts. Like a lot of this talk sounds like self-defeating. It sounds nuts. Even when you're talking to other people and someone like labels themselves as like a chronic relapser, and the people that will justify blaming them not doing the work. Because, and at that point too, like as the stresses of life and everything else like started to increase, I'm still doing all these things, but my mental health is not improving, right? Or it's getting worse over time, right? And it built up to such a head, it's like, wait, maybe this was never the issue in the first place, right? Because I did like it, labeled this at 20 years old, like maybe it was some other mental health that now, because I have never dealt with it, like it's rearing its ugly head now that I'm under all this stress and distress from life and just society. And sure as shit, there was something else there. And I was like, God damn it. You're just like, well, that's interesting, and then it changes like the way you look things and changes the scope, and you're just like, okay, maybe mental health is like far more important, and especially like when it's young people, like and that's when I started speaking up about it, is because I was like, all my clients when I was an interventionist, and that was the last thing I did when I was formally working in the space, were young. They were like under 25.
Yes.
And I just like, I couldn't help but get this feeling like there's no shot that like that this is this like rampant, and there's no shot that this is the best route for them, right? And then looking back at myself, I was like, had I gotten introduced to like probably the right professionals, probably would have like curbed the substance use disorder, which was obviously was there. You don't overdose because like you're having fun, right? So there was obviously something, but like again, symptom of a much bigger issue. Is just, I mean, it's interesting just how it's so easy just to label someone in that paradigm, and families do it all the time because it's like you don't understand what's happening and or don't want to admit the potential part you play in the role of what's happening to your child.
Yeah,
that's hard. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I 100% believe, I don't want to say totally across the board because there's always the exception to the rule. Nothing is, one thing I've learned is nothing is black and white. We try too hard to put either everything here or everything there when so many people with everything are kind of in the middle somewhere, right? And it even says it in the big book. It says alcohol was but a symptom, but for that, it's the symptom of the spiritual malady. I feel for a majority of us who end up using chaotically, it's but a symptom. It doesn't even have to be the most traumatic thing. A lot of times it can be mental health. Like for me, it ended up being my ADHD, even though it seemed like it wasn't. But so much of my addict personality was mental health issues. It wasn't my character defects. It wasn't my block from God and this spiritual connections. Talking about treatment, I could talk about treatment all fucking day, especially young people. I started going early 20s. You went 20, like so many people. When I was in Dallas, Texas, there would be houses for like 16 to 23, and it's like, how are you going to label a 16-year-old who to have this lifelong disease? They could just be having a chaotic time and be completely fine and be drinking normally by the time they're 21, but they're putting this in these young people's heads, and it's only gonna fuck with them more, especially when they're not, because treatment, you're just dealing with this substance use disorder, right? And if your real problem isn't your substance use disorder, if that's technically, they even say it in the program, that's your solution, and then here's this solution, but you're just given all this, treatment, triggers, blah, blah, blah. But then we are left with all this mental health stuff that never gets dealt with. And everything just becomes all about the program, all about, substance use disorder. So how many, did you end up, did you go to treatment the first time and then you just jumped right in, and then you've been sober since, or what was that journey like?
Yeah, no, I went to 3 places, but they were all concurrent. Spending like 7.5 months. I was very stubborn, just like because I'd make a step, but then it'd be like, that doesn't seem right. But again, when you're given like no options, you'd be surprised what you become agreeable to, even
Totally.
No matter how defiant or stubborn you are. And so that was 7.5 months. That took me from like New Jersey to New Hampshire to Austin, Texas, and then stayed here in Austin. And that's like when I like kind of something clicked so to speak, in that place where it allowed me to at least like hop on board fully. And for a long time it was good. I had like your prescribed experience, you know. I think things were amazing, but until they weren't. And I think that, like, to what you said, like that solution, like, it's got almost like a shelf life to it if there's not an evolution of like what's propelling you, because a lot of it's shame based. So that shame based speak is just not good for anyone's nervous system, especially a young person before their personalities even fully developed. Like that, what are we doing? You're just teaching them to be hyper vigilant and super self conscious and like a lot of not so great things that are going to cause, again, bigger issues later on. And so it's kind of interesting how that like kind of all unravels like that, even with the young people. I started thinking about this, actually. I saw a TikTok the other day talking about like how AA used to be and the anonymity piece of it all. And I think if it went back to that, it'd be different. I think I'd have zero gripes, right, with this whole thing. I think you and I probably going to treatment would never have been introduced to it, right? You know, because it actually would follow its thing. But now with like social media and everything else, I mean, I can't, like, if I speak about recovery, I can't help but get inundated, like, on my FYP by people promoting the 12 steps. I'm like, how are you doing this in good, like, or even people that think they understand it and then say, no, it's just the steps. I'm like, but the traditions are a part of it. How do I have a better understanding of it, but I'm speaking against it? Also saying that I have a positive experience. It's very interesting that people have kind of this like inability to step outside their experience and potentially question like these little things without like someone being resentful, right? Or like these victim blaming terms that they'll just throw at you because they don't have another alternative, or that's what they were taught. So it's like, if you're, and you experience this, when your entire identity is centered around something, to deconstruct that is like, it's absolutely terrifying. And I definitely wouldn't have done it willingly, like at the time. If I could have like kept that identity, it was nice there for a little bit, like it wasn't all bad, but
Yeah, I did some treatment in Dallas for a while. I'm in Massachusetts. I was, raised here, but spent a lot of time in Texas. And I will say the treatment and the rooms, like the program down there, I do think that it's not necessarily location based, it's meeting based, right? Like it's big book if you go to like big book study meetings versus discussion meetings, like you're going to have kind of a very different experience. But I will say the AA, the 12 step that I went to actually like DAA, Drug Addicts Anonymous, but we used the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was very strong. Do you find that in Austin? I know Austin's, supposed to be a little bit more chill vibe, or do you find it very like big book strong?
I mean, Austin prides itself on being like ridiculously big book strong.
Really?
I mean, that's how I was taught. Again, like the last fellowship I was a part of was DA for like the last like 6 years, But no, it was all centered around the big book, and if you didn't do something, you weren't following something in like the 164. Like I think I know that thing like too well at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's all centered versus, like you said, like the East Coast, like I am familiar there. It's not big book centric, not to that capacity at least.
Right.
Which is funny because people in Texas will like kind of like gossip or like put down any other program or state that doesn't worship the big book in the regard that they do, which is funny.
Yeah, it's like AA. I mean, I used to be a part of it. I'd be like, oh, AA light, like you can't handle the full thing. It's just you kind of get, especially young people, like young people DAA. Young people AA is its own cult within the cult. Honestly, itself. It's like, I mean, that's like a high school experience within the rooms. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
it's intense, and I feel like it almost becomes like I remember I'd be like, loading up the car and be like, let's go drop some spiritual bombs, and it was almost like who can have like the best share. It wasn't really about like, it was more about honestly, it was more about ego, really. Who could sound like they were working the program the hardest, who had the most sponsees, who had the most commitments. It's just such a shitty vibe.
It really is, and I think for a good amount of people, it's unsustainable because you burn yourself out doing it, right? Even if you have balance doing that, there's still this subtle ego that like you said, that exists around like the kind of program that you work. Like, Like I had it. I can't tell you how many 4 steps I did within the first like 3 years because I wanted to do this shit the best and perfectly and blah blah blah, right? Even though it's like that's not really a thing. But then the leaders, which use that term loosely because no one's gonna self-identify as one, but they are there, are the ones like kind of promoting that same culture, and saying the same shit. It's robotic as all dick all, and then those are the same ones that own all the treatment centers in the area. So naturally, anyone who's like finds themselves in the rooms probably got exposure through one of these days I think it's like 12 treatment centers in the Austin area, and you get funneled into the rooms, and that is your only option. There isn't like another promoted option in any one of these, and they'll even say their mental health first, but then they have like that subtle undertone of the steps,
Yeah.
right there, and it's like, what are you talking about? And then every single recovery coach, and you look around, and all of a sudden it's like the only people who stick around. Like I was actively participating for like 10 years. That last year was like me fading into the back. But over those 10 years, like the core group, I maybe increased by like 5. Like, and it was kind of ridiculous. And of the core group, all of them are in like higher positions at treatment centers. Like it's not even like they do much else. Like, and the ones that do other things usually end up leaving completely, and you don't hear about them. And then you'll ask around and be like, oh, I don't know, I just pray about them, and there's like this subtle just undertone. If you like distance yourself, like then you're gonna die, right? And it's just like, what is going on? Like, this doesn't feel natural or feel like what I thought it was going into it, right? And it, like, where it's like all supposed to be love and we're all accepted, but then like very quickly you find it couldn't be further from the truth. Like, it's like it is a very performative and like incentive based program, and it's like if you behave, then then amazing things will happen to you, and if you don't, then it's like you're in self will. Like, the reasons that things are happening is because you're just selfish, and like God forbid, it's like you're resentful. It's like you just need to do inventory, and it's very interesting how these like kind of spiritual principles get weaponized, and then also the like complete disregard for any of the traditions, which is like probably the most alarming and like probably most paramount these days with like social media. It's just like everywhere. And now it's like a trend to be sober too, and people don't really understand like what they're talking about, even in prescribing abstinence to somebody, because like it's still like a perfect ideal, and like with perfectionism, like you learn that usually is like a snake eating its own tail. Like, it's going to fall in onto itself at one point or another, because perfection is unattainable always. Like,
Right.
Barring a computer screen.
No, totally. You were talking about how if the anonymity thing was like practiced, right? For me, I always say, like, if I went to treatment or anyone went to treatment and AA was presented, like if they had a table of options, right? And they say, you can go to AA, you can go to Smart Recovery, you can try utilizing cannabis, or if you're not ready to be sober, here are some things that you can do, that are going to help you use the safest way that you possibly can, right? It's insane to me now that I'm removed from it. When I was in it, I would have thought this was insane, but it's insane to me that there's no talk about overdose prevention, safe using, like safer practices, none of that in treatment. It's all about abstinence, abstinence, abstinence. And it's like, if you are saying to, look to your right, look to your left, only one of you is still going to be here. If you know that, then how is that not negligent to just talk about abstinence, 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 and have people are leaving there and getting high. The odds are pretty fucking big and you give them nothing. You just had them for what, sometimes a week, sometimes 28 days, sometimes 6 months to a year, however long you got them, right? And that they have now increased the likelihood of them overdosing when they pick up, and you give them jack shit in terms of education of because they always think, well, you don't want to enable, you don't want to assume that they're, and it's just like, you are enabling people to die.
I said very casual kind of victim blaming. I think a lot of providers don't realize like what they're doing, because it's a very, I mean, let's be real, like the whole undertone of America is a very ableist like mindset, even like capitalism or consumerism, if you will. Like, it's like kind of ingrained, right, into like the way we all operate and believe. So it's like very easy to like cast aside, like, oh, why would I help someone do something wrong? Ignoring the other side of like, if they're alive, they actually have the opportunity to do something right at some point or another. And I'll use right very loosely, but like they have an opportunity to do something different if they're still breathing, right? And so, like you said, like you looked to your like I remember that talk too. Took it very personally. I made sure I wasn't one of those people, but they weren't wrong either, because there was like
Right.
maybe like four of us that like are still sober today, or like doing well today, or even alive, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Alive.
yeah, like why can't we be shouting harm reduction from the rooftops, especially like with how things are today? Because back when I was 20, I mean, you could still kind of fuck around and not find out for a little bit,
Right.
but nowadays it's you don't even have to be fucking around. You could be accidentally falling into like a death, and it's there's so many things that we kind of just like set people up for failure around, like this idea of abstinence and it being just like that's it, without acknowledging the fact that like they're probably not going to do it, so why not put those safeguards in there? It's very frustrating, like, and probably is like malpractice, negligence might even, it sounds like it does fall underneath there if you like, you know, label
Like
that
if you know
correctly,
this is gonna happen and you're
right?
doing nothing to help, I mean, how is it not? It's just it's the insanity of it all. It just doesn't. It, it's just it doesn't make any sense. What brought you to social media? Like, at what point were you like, I'm going to make a video about it? Because it is kind of especially when you have the background and that people know you are gonna, almost like if old people in your home group saw you, they'd be like, oh man, like Gibbs ain't doing good, bro. He looks like he's on his way back out. Like he's in denial. He's talking all sorts of crazy shit. Like what got you to make your first video?
Well, there's a reason I keep my shit off of Facebook, because that is just littered. I've had to slowly just like, kind of defriend people, or just at least like not have like follow them, so I'm not seeing like your average business development bullshit and all those fun things. So like it will be an interesting point when my content starts like finding its way there. Because like again, like you said, there will be that like pushback, scrutiny, and all those fun things to deal with from people that are supposed to be anonymous. But my first video came, honestly, it was a friend down here that you may know him, Macaulay, or
Yeah.
Sex in Space. Him and I went to the same sober living 10 years ago.
No way.
And and I remember he was, I think, my roommate, or he was my roommate for one part of it. And I remember the day he left, but like we would go to the meetings all the time and stuff. And so like our journeys both kind of started in the same spot, and then I went towards like North Austin, he stayed in South Austin, and then we both like kind of had your prescribed experience. But very recently, like it was like end of spring, beginning of the summer. Actually, it was a recovery event down here in Austin. It was like their South by Recovery Bonanza, whatever. He was actually there, which I was shocked at. But me and him sat down and talked, just about like kind of similar conversation that we're having right now. And I was like, dude, I've been watching your shit for some time now, and at first I didn't agree, and now I can't not see it everywhere. And then one day I just reached out. I was like, dude, I can't operate within the 12 steps anymore, and I also feel like something needs to happen because this stuff is so pervasive. It's like what other route of like doing something? Because like just having these conversations with like people one-on-one, I mean, it doesn't happen. I tried with like some of my close friends that like I trusted to be like drop these hints on like the shit's kind of toxic, but they can't get out of their own survivorship bias. So it's like one of my good friends I almost lost because like I was I was determined to get him to break the veil, and you can't force someone to like see this stuff. It's got to be like really led into gently. But we had a talk. He's like, dude, just make a video. I was like, and like the whole idea of social media has always given me, has always made my skin crawl. I'm like being perceived that much, like, and knowing how dramatic or like temperamental I can be sometimes. I'm like, ugh, is that really a good idea? But then like I was just like, at what point do I have to lose? Like, at what point, what do I have to lose? And then also, maybe I do have something like worth saying, and then I just ran with it. And then, I mean, I've been taking a break recently, but I've been trying to just figure out what I want to say, because there are so many different points, right? You can like talk about the entire culture of the AA as a whole and like be talking about that for weeks. How it's interconnected with like the criminal justice system and the treatment system as well, all the way into like what to do, like, and then talking also somewhere about a solution, right? Or like what's the next step too, and then talking about harm reduction and like how that's just been like somehow like argued against even by myself too. Like you said, I was one of those people who
Mhm.
like used to think harm reduction was a joke and
Yeah.
just, an excuse to still get high,
Mhm.
not understanding, the other side of all of that. So that's kind of how I like fell into it. And then like we'll see what happens. I have no idea. I've been like, I do a podcast here. I just did a podcast with Macaulay actually earlier this week. Um, and so it's kind of like just like I hope, pray, and see, kind of like maybe something manifests from this, maybe it doesn't. If nothing else, hopefully at least people get a real inside look at like what's happening instead of just like, because all there is on the social media are the people sort of promoting the 12 steps or abstinence-based recovery, and like I can only imagine if that feels like the only trap and you're sitting there struggling, it's like, well, then I'm just screwed.
Yeah.
And then it really feels like there's no way out, and then that's when we lose people. And like, I don't know, at the end of the day, if I can contribute to like people staying alive, that like that's all I ever wanted to do in the first place. And so I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. I think like for me, it's like I always like the part of 12 step that I did like was like I did want to help other people. I just
Hmm.
couldn't help myself though. So it was like I was really, really struggling. And I mean, DAA, it's like you just work the steps as fast as you can and get working with people as fast as you can, because that's when all the shit's supposed to happen. And it fucking happened for me. But I kept trying to fake it until I make it, because I was like, I didn't want anyone to think that I was sick and suffering. So I would talk the talk, walk the walk, do all the things. And every time I would go back out, like what you were saying, like how it gets to where it's not sustainable. Every time I would come back, I would pick up another commitment, right? So I'm like, okay, well now I'm carrying the message 5 times a week. So now I'm really going to stay sober. But then it's like I'm so burnt out. I have no time for myself. I'm going crazy. I'm talking to my sponsor about how crazy I feel. You know what I'm supposed to do? I'm supposed to pray and help more people. But then it's like I get home, my little twin bed at my sober house, and I put my head down, and it's like all of those things that were running through my mind are still running through my mind. Yeah, I did feel better when I was helping Susie with her step work and all that shit. But at night, I still had the same fucking problems that I woke up with, and I feel worse because I did all this stuff that was supposed to make it better, and it didn't. And it's just like the program. I always say how it's like there's so many variations of it. We call it 12-step programs, but I mean you can work the program one way and have a totally different experience than somebody else. Like there are people who never touch the literature, who never work a step, who, I mean, we used to make fun of those people, like they weren't really doing the work, right? And it's the whole thing. It's like talking about it for me is just that I always wanted to help people. And now it's like I think the best way to help people is to let them know it's not about shitting on the program, although it always gets twisted that way. But
Hmm.
it's like we are prescribing prayer for people that are going to look for help, and that would never be acceptable for anything. Not a damn thing would that be acceptable for anything else, but it is the main thing that we do for substance use disorder. And I don't think a lot of people know that. Like my parents didn't know. My mom still goes to church every Sunday. Like she's a Catholic, she does her thing. She was like, when she found out that what they were paying for was for me to surrender my will and my life over the care of God, even she was like, what the hell? It's wild.
Yeah, when you lay it out like that, and it's funny too, because the first rebuttal is going to be like, there's that one paragraph, like I think it's on like like 36 or some shit, like where it references like if you have other outside issues, you should go to. It's one paragraph in 164 pages. That you know what I mean. So it's like that's super disingenuous. They're like, oh, but does mention it after you've already been like run through the gambit, and not even to mention how traumatic a 4-step can be too if you're forced to like relive some of this stuff outside of like a therapeutic environment. Like I could easily see that being like something that would like twist me off, like had I not been in like a secure 4-wall facility to do
Right.
it, which is again it's sort of against my will too, because the only way to get out of that place was to run through the 12 steps. And that, I mean, there's two things that come up with that too. There's like there's no regulations on most of this stuff, or like very little to none. In Texas, the 448, which deals with substance abuse, hasn't been updated since like 1985.
Oh.
Like so for like 40 years, and they still can't finish like the updated version of it all. So there allows a lot of wiggle room, and you can open up just what's called a recovery center that has zero accreditation or anything else and be completely within codes. And that's where, like, I used to think that was like so beautiful because I used to believe it. And I'm like, oh my God, like that. Oh my goodness. Like I truly think I harmed some people working there, and like the things that were coming out of my mouth that I believed, but I didn't know any better. Um, my hope would be that, like, hey, it would go back to being what it originally was intended to be, which was the last resort,
Right.
right? It was meant for like these drunks that were like 50 years old that tried to literally everything fucking else and like that were dying of sclerosis. You know how long that takes to manifest? Right? Like they were literally like, if you take one more drink, you'll die. That takes a long time for someone just drinking alcohol, right? Obviously, like with illicit supply of drugs, like this timeline's been shortened, but that doesn't mean that like solution needs to like loop back around to like where it is there. I don't know how you can like correlate the two, but it is done so frequent, like it's just done so openly and frequently without like a second guess to it. Um, and if it was like, you know, placed back at the end of the road as the last last stop on the block. These people are anonymous. We don't know who the fuck they are as it's supposed to be. I think it'd be a whole different discussion, and I think it'd be really easy for like us when we like critique it to not sound like we're bashing it because they're actually doing their thing, and there honestly wouldn't be too much to say about it, right? The issue is like if you're realistically probably under 30 and you're getting introduced to like an abstinence-based program centered around God, which that's what it is, right? And prescribe prayer for like probably like really serious mental health issues. And even if they say that it's like, oh, I'm also doing psychiatry and everything else, that underlying tone, it's really hard to like separate the two if you're within it. Like it's almost impossible. Then like there'd be a conversation to be had like, okay, it's good and it like this is something that like we can like support, but it's hard to like find that like when it seems like every day and every year it gets more and more invasive into society, into culture, and into these places that are supposed to be like medical facilities with medical professionals. Like it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and like the reach of social media is becoming more and more okay to like not be anonymous. Because back in the day there really were no studies, and so like we couldn't even know the effect. Like we never should know the efficacy of the anonymous program in truth, in theory.
Yeah.
Right? But that's like again, that's like speaking from a vacuum. I'll get caught up in like these ideologies of like, yeah, that's never gonna happen, Gil. That's like not real. But I'm like, but if that did happen, then like there's your one solution. You know, there's the way y'all can exist. It's just like, and it's crazy too. It's so crazy how online nobody understands this concept of anonymity and why it is so important. Because like you're not supposed to be the face of it. Because if you are a jackass. Which many of them are, like you're supposed to not be connected to the name. And then also like there used to be some privacy. The internet's kind of interesting how we'll just tell on ourselves. There's stuff you'll never torture out of me that people just openly admit on the internet. So that's like kind of out the window too. So like as like open as we become and everything else, it's just like very subtly become like a much more sinister, much more rampant issue than like I think 10 years ago these conversations didn't need to be had, but now it's becoming like a really big problem, and also people are dying at like clips that like we've never seen before.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of the whole anonymity thing and the, you know, kind of principles before personalities type vibe, I honestly am even seeing like the importance of it with something like harm reduction and content creation, because I'm seeing people who are having beef with people who may make harm reduction content, and now these people put harm, now they're associating this person's personality with harm reduction, and now they're anti-harm reduction when they really don't know shit about it, but they're just, you know, I'm seeing it on the other side too, and it's like it's the internet and content creation is a very slippery slope, you know, and you can like get put in these communities without even really being in the community, but people are going to automatically link you with this person because in their mind you talk about the same things, and that person you may not really align with that person, you know, and then now it's kind of crazy.
And that's like I think that's an issue we're all going to be like having to navigate. Like there are some good things within like the traditions and the principles of the steps like that are worth incorporating, like you said, like principles before personalities, the group being in front of the person. It just seems like the problem is, and this is, I don't know, I need, one of these days I need to make like a chart, but it seems like as something gets to a certain size or certain notoriety, there's a fall off on like from the initiating principle that it started at, right? It ditches that because it got too big, and whether because like the group got too big or whatever else, and it like I was talking about this with somebody else, and I would love to like start groups where we talk about AA and like, or like where it offers alternative recovery, but then I see the same trap. And I'm like, shit. Like,
Yeah.
it almost seems unavoidable to a certain degree, and it's like, oh, you got to keep your circle small, right? Community is important, but the moment you try to prescribe anything like on a larger scale, barring harm reduction is one of those things, like we just need to get people out in the streets to help more people. As long as it doesn't organize, that should be fine. But it seems like the moment you try to organize anything to actually benefit people on a larger scale, the other side of the bullshit comes in.
Yeah.
And like I don't know the answer to it. I've been racking my head for a long time trying to figure out how to circumvent that in any way, shape, or form that's realistic and not just sounds good ideas, because we love our sounds good ideas until like they're put in practical application.
Yeah.
But yeah, social media makes it is a very interesting place. It is.
It is.
People will correlate you with whatever they want. Most of the time, it's just personal projection, which people really don't want to have too much conversation about that. When you know it, though, it's fun, because then you you can tell exactly what someone's like, where someone's been hurt, or what like what they're about, and just like their comments or videos or whatever. But yeah, TikTok makes it is a very interesting place as well. I mean, there's so many different avenues to go, and like you can get caught up in any kind of like, not like psychosis, but like your head starts spinning a little bit if you get like start watching like some of the same content, and you're like, wait a minute, what in the world is going on? And as long as you have like discernment, you're okay. But I mean, that can like go in like 2 seconds as well. So the internet's crazy.
It is.
It's a wild place.
It is, and like it's been great for spreading, factual information. But as much as it spreads factual information, it spreads misinformation. It feels like twice as fast, and it's like a lot of times you'll see on the internet the misinformation, like like the cops that are overdosing that aren't really overdosing, that kind of stuff gets the clicks and the views so then it's like all of that spreads like wildfire, and then you come in trying to tell the truth and everyone thinks you're crazy when you have like the actual truth. It's wild, and people will support the misinformation. It's just I don't know.
It gives them something to fear, right? It's a lot easier to live in this life when you can like point your finger at like a specific thing and vilify it, and then distance and separate yourself from it, and then I'm not the problem, and everything's okay. And it's not done maliciously. I don't think people are doing this with any ill will. It just happens. And so when you see these ridiculous, because like you think for 2 seconds, there's no way like someone's touching fentanyl like and overdose. It's just not. It's not how that works.
Like, how could they bag it up to sell it?
Well, oh my god, exactly. But it was like, I remember that was recent, but like even like it was like 4 years ago. I remember the story coming out. It might have even been longer than that. Some lady touched a dollar bill that had fentanyl on it, and like a McDonald's and overdose. I'm like, there's no fucking way, dude. Like I've touched like many different illicit substances. None of which like your skin's there for a reason, but none of which you just get fucked up over by touching. Like I've had my hands covered in things. Yeah, it just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
But again, like it would take a second to like actually learn about drugs, which like when you have DARE and everything else, the whole kind of like mentality, whether it be like willful or just subconscious, is drugs are bad.
Yes.
And that's as far as that conversation ever goes, right? It's not. And I think that that's why Burn the Stigma is great. Like I think like really battling that stigma and like identifying the human behind the issue versus and like bringing them to the forefront, rather than just like, I mean, since the war on drugs, it's just been drugs are the problem. It's that simple. End of story. And like anything to suggest otherwise is just like an excuse and or just like just nefarious in intent, right? and it's been so widely accepted that like I don't think many people even like would think to question it, because there are
Right.
like obviously there's plenty of bad people that do bad things on drugs like too often in the news that don't want any help, and so that's one thing, but then it's just casting a broad net on like a whole bunch of people, like a whole bunch of disillusioned people, and it's crazy too. That's the one, I've said this for years and I'll probably continue saying it, probably not like with too much acceptance, but like it's the one subsect of people that you can really be openly prejudiced about and celebrate it at the same time,
Right.
which is crazy, right? Like stupid junkie or
Yeah.
whatever it might be, you know. And I think eventually over time it'll be like, fortunately TikTok reaches like the younger kids, and like
Yeah.
they might get like a glimpse of, you know, like some awareness so that if they do come into issues, but it really is, I think, something top to bottom that like there needs to be this destigmatization and like decriminalization of this idea of drugs. Will that ever happen? Probably not. But if we can get more people on board, then I think less people would absolutely die. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I used to think even when I first like finally was like done with chaotic use, I still had so much of the misinformation in my brain, right? Like I still thought that like the drugs were the enemy, like the substances. I was still mad at the Sacklers. I was still fuck fentanyl. You know what I mean? Like all of that kind of that vibe, because I still believed that it was the drugs that were the enemy. I didn't realize it's prohibition that's the enemy, and that like a majority of the problems that we have would go away if they were legal. Like, and I hate to always use alcohol as the example, but I just feel like it's so perfect, right? Because there are plenty of people who still suffer with alcohol use disorder, right? Like there are still plenty of people that die from alcohol related deaths every single year, but none of them are dying from going into the store and buying something and ingesting something that they had zero intention of ingesting. They're able to go to the store and get the same, know how much, how much by volume, like it's very predictable for them. So I'm not saying that, having drugs be legal is going to take away all of the issues. Of course not, right? The people are still people. People still are people. But the hot button topics, the things that we talk about and fight for, those things go way down. Way down. And it's like once you can realize that, I think that is, or at least that's what it was for me. Like once I realized that the real problem is them being illegal, like that's where these deaths are coming from, that you can see a huge correlation between when like OCs and like all of the opioid prescriptions, when those cut way down, you can see a huge spike in the overdoses that went up, right?
Yep.
It's like the data is right there, but people have to be willing to hear something other than don't do drugs, drugs are bad.
That's really what it boils down to. It takes like a level, it takes a good amount of critical thinking to get there too, because your conventional logic is like, you have the bad thing, so just remove the bad thing.
Right.
Right. And it's like that simple. But to what you're saying, like the numbers say otherwise. History says otherwise. I mean, we even look at like the prohibition movement back in the 20s, like crime went way up. Like everything got way worse. There's a reason why they brought it back at a certain point. And then, but unfortunately, you had Oregon who tried to like do it in their own way, not like really. And you just saw the problem become bigger. But they've done studies abroad too, like in Portugal has done a beautiful job of this. And the only problem is I don't think Americans could stay the course and have the patience to see the other side. Because once you open the floodgate, once you take off the restrictions, floodgates are going to open initially, because why not? Why wouldn't they? Like, seriously, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't we all go nuts for a little bit? Or at least most people be inclined to. Especially this day and age, like, shit. Like, go, like, they're going to. But what you find is, and then this is the part that I don't think we'd have the patience for, is like, you'd find that because it's readily available, there's less issues overall. People aren't just like going to using it compulsively. I mean, I believe 90 to 95% of our prison population is for drug-related offenses. So like, so many things would domino down, and the biggest one being the deaths of people going down. But I don't truly, as a country, I don't know that it will, especially with the day in like social media where it is now and how instantaneous things are. Because the moment there's like absolute shit show of a thing. People are gonna be calling for the plug or calling for it to be stopped. But I agree. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I think any kind of prohibition, restrictive movement in any regard has not really proven to be effective long term nor beneficial for the people that they are claiming to help.
Right.
And I wish it wasn't that case, but I mean, it just sometimes it's hard to I just take deep sighs because I'm just like, it could be so simple, but it's not because we all come from different backgrounds and we all have like our own lived experience, and like many of us are not taught to like step outside of that experience for like a second or two just to like potentially like think, hey, could it be this, that, or the third, just because I haven't seen, lived it, or heard it, you know?
Right.
And God, yeah, increasing critical thinking, and not even that in like a not even like a condescending sense, just like in a like open your brains. I
Yeah.
mean, it has its pros and cons too. Sometimes I wish I didn't question anything, right? I wish I go back to sleep. Sometimes I feel like just give me the blue pill. Just kidding. I didn't want to wake up to
Yeah.
anything. Um, but if more people did it, it wouldn't feel so lonely. You know,
Right.
if more people were willing to ask like the tough questions or be honest with themselves and other people, I think we'd find it'd be a much different experience around these kind of conversations. You know, because I think it'd be interesting to have someone up here that's not honest with themselves. And you know what? And obviously you need to coddle these kind of people too. You don't need to gotcha moments are not it, but I think it'd be very interesting because it would be highlighted real quickly. It's like you, me, and like people who like question the 12 steps are advocating for personal autonomy and open-mindedness, while the people who are claiming they're open-minded spiritual are the ones that are like very authoritative.
Dude, like
It's
it's
like it's like
it's
what?
it's like it's so insane. They always say like, oh, like you just don't want to take accountability, and it's like, listen, I believe my whole thing is that people can be accountable, right? Like even people who are using drugs can make decisions that are safer decisions, but like you always want to act like they can't make any good choices. Once the drugs are in their system, now they're just like these mindless people who can't do anything but like use drugs. But it's like even in active use, you make decisions every single day, right?
Yeah.
Like even if you are committing crime, you're not just like going out there like you still plan the crime. You still, am I going to do it here? Am I going to rob this person? Am I going to There are still decisions that you make every single day. And they are the ones who take away the accountability when it's like, oh, that's your disease. That's your disease. When you're putting all the blame on the disease, where's the fucking accountability there? That once you put a substance in your body, you lose all control? Where's the accountability? I'm saying that you can put a substance in your body and you can still be a responsible fucking person and make choices, and you don't have to be this, but we're also like for me, I sometimes I wonder how many times did I return to use? Did I do it because I thought that's what was going to happen anyways, because I had stopped doing my step work. I had taken a step, you know what I mean? Like, did I
Mm.
program myself? Like they say that's self-fulfilled prophecy. Did I become that? Or who knows? And I'll never know. But it's just, that one always drives me nuts. The whole, you don't want to take accountability, bro. It's like you're programmed. There's zero accountability there. There's zero accountability that once you put a substance in your body, you lose control. Sorry. It's
Oh,
just, it's insane.
and it's completely like a depersonalization of like the individual, which over time is not a good, like it initially might be necessary to a certain degree, but if it's not rebuilt and reestablished, that then all you are is like an arm of the mechanism or arm of the machine that exists. You're not really your own person, and you will run into walls that you can't get through because there isn't that sense of self-esteem, identity, or all the other healthy attributes that are needed because of to what you're saying. Like you completely dismiss the accountability of the choices that you can and do make on a regular basis, kind of vilify the entire experience, and then also yourself in the process, to where you have to detach from yourself if you want to try to fall in line, which just is so detrimental to the human psyche, right? Especially at a younger age too. Like maybe if you're like 50 years old and proven like that, like you still can't figure it out or anything else, maybe sure, but like to someone who's young, that is like such a potentially damaging mindset to like begin to like embody, that I don't think people realize, especially if there's other things going on to where you said it's, oh, it's my disease. And if there's actual mental health shit going on there, it's like, that's gonna be a real problem, especially as, oh, I stopped doing my steps because of X, Y, or Z. It's like, or maybe you're just like ADHD and have depression, right?
Right.
Because you've been through some shit in life, and or like, potentially have like some kind of like CPTSD or PTSD that like is like inhibiting you from doing certain things, and you're just like, no, I'm just a dumb addict. It's my disease, you know. And of course, there's compulsions around things, but that's a whole nother mental health thing too as well. Like, if you're ADHD, like, of course you're gonna get hyper focused on the one thing that makes you feel fucking amazing for the first time probably ever, until you learn that it's not okay, and then you can do something else or something different, or you learn to manage and mitigate that as much as you can while you figure out something different, you know. And I think that's like the main like thing that we should promote, is just like trying to give people more of a shot to figure those things out, because now with the supply the way it is today, like there aren't too many like trials. It kind of really is like Russian roulette.
Yeah, 100%.
And unfortunately, like, unfortunately, like, the professionals feed off of that, because it is, God, the amount of conversation I've been in that kind of like really just thinking about it makes my entire body cringe, on like playing out the fears of loved ones and everything else. And you hear what it does is it creates such a strain on the relationship too, between like the loved one and like usually the caregiver, that has its own everlasting effects, because neither side can move on from that. And it creates it just creates a ball of like bullshit that like is just, or a powder keg, if you will, that's like all you need is the right match for that to be like undone, and then things are 10 times worse than they were on the other side of it. But the individual will forever get blamed for any and all of that, despite the fact that like obviously they didn't grow up alone, you know, or obviously you weren't raised alone. And even within the rooms, like obviously you're in an environment, so if you're having a negative experience, it is perfectly possible it's like a reflection of the environment that you're in, and not you as an individual. Just maybe, but but it takes a lot to like get to that point,
Yeah.
to where you're actually willing to like it took me a minute, like it's got to be like spoon fed almost too. And like I appreciate when I see online like the apologists, because I know they're on their way. When people are trying to like find that middle ground in between the two, it's like, nope, you're starting to see it.
Mm-hmm.
You're starting to see it. Just keep tugging at that thread a little bit. You'll get there. I promise.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I had one person, my friend, she's like my friend now, Melissa. She used to like follow and unfollow me, and she always wanted to be the middle ground of, of AA. The program works, but I can understand that it doesn't work for everyone. That's kind of how it starts, right? Then she would start to see the things that I would talk about. She would see them like taking place, and then she would try to talk to people that she thought that she aligned with, that she was close with in there. And then they just did not see it, could not, it was always something, well, that person, this, that, and then eventually she left, she was like, it just, because I think it's one of those things that once the mask comes off, like once you see it for what it is, I don't think there is any going back, like it's just wide open,
There really isn't. Every so often I'll try to like sit through a meeting again, and like just, because I still know people, so I try to be friendly, try to not disappear on everybody.
Yeah.
And so I'll say hi, whatever. I'll just keep my mouth shut, because I have nothing good to say at all. But it's like I can't sit through a whole one anymore. Like I'm like 30 minutes in, I'm like, this is fucking nuts. Like I feel crazy. Like I feel, and like I have to like step outside. I'm like, nah, I can't do that. No more. No more defeating myself before things even get started,
It's wild because we used to eat that shit up and say all this shit and be all about it.
I remember at the end, like I'd become aware of how much shame was involved, and I had like gone on this own like personal. I say this with a few people. I feel like if you go on the spiritual journey, actually, you will discover how shame-based things are, and even if you don't correlate it immediately to the program, you'll begin to try to separate from it and find a way to be like pulled by love instead of being pushed by fear. And in that process, I would start, even my verbiage and everything else was shifting away from the program and everything else, because I realized how like extremely harmful like that kind of rhetoric is to an individual, to the point where it accidentally, like, I woke myself up to a certain degree, just
Mm.
realizing how much shame I embodied and everything else. And like, yeah, you do eat that up. It's like almost if you're the biggest piece of shit, like you're celebrated. Like it's like because now I'm not, and it's like, but I still am, but I'm not in this weird fucking way. It's like I'm so fucking powerless. Like, blah, blah, like it's crazy. Yeah, hearing it with a clear ear when you're not under the spell and brainwashed into believing that this is the right way to do it, and you're a third party. I remember shit that came out of my mouth, and I can't believe that I was like saying it confidently.
I know, with my whole chest.
Whole chest. From the
Like,
rooftops, I believe this shit.
yes, yes. You know, and I think that is always, you know, when you have the people on social media, the 12 steppers, they're like, oh, another person that went to a meeting and didn't like it. It's like, no, this was my life. This was my identity. This was like, I lived and eat and breathe, you know, the whole shit. You know, it's like I probably know the book, even though I've been away from it, I probably still know the book better than half these people that talk shit, right? This isn't about, the reason that we're so passionate about it is because we were so involved in it and we get it, you know? Like, I don't think that you can still critique 12-step without having any real experience, you know, being on the outside, absolutely. But it is a whole nother level when you have been speaking the speak and talking. It's just a whole different level, and that always gets me. It's like, dude, you have no idea, like, this used to be my shit, you know? It's
It
wild.
it is interesting. That's like the first assumption too.
Mm-hmm.
That you know, just now you had a bad experience, or like, you know, one essay thing, or this, that, whatever the case might be, that like you couldn't have possibly done everything that I'm doing,
Right.
and had a different experience. It's like, what the fuck, like. And no, it truly is mind-boggling to see that people, and it's so frequent too. Like
So
every
frequent.
any person you see that like kind of comes on like in a negative tone of comment or whatever else have you, just automatically assumes you're trying to do something devious, which, when you come back to projection, is the funniest thing on the planet.
Mm.
It's like, okay, I see where you're at. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. You
Yeah.
know, I don't really need to say too much sometimes. It's just,
Right?
you know, I just like dot dot dot, like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, I think I commented on one, or I made a video on one thing. It's wild. Again, it's wild. People like will record something, play it back, and be like, yeah, that's solid. I could
That's
post
the
that to
one.
hundreds, potentially thousands of people and stand behind that, and I'm eviscerating somebody, or I'm like doing this, that, the third. I'm okay, okay, and it will be those people that are also just like so bought into the 12 steps as a cult, and a lot of times too, it's because they're benefiting the most from that kind of culture. So it makes it hard for them to even want to step outside of it in the first place. Like, especially if I was one of the leaders. I'm sure you were too at one point or another. You know, it like to begin to like step outside of that role and like step away from that is not. I mean, I like that's not a fun thing to do.
No.
Nor is it easy. You know, I think if it was easy, everybody at this point would probably like wake up to it a little bit. But it's I think the words like, oh shit, what they the same way they describe alcoholism is the same way actually that the steps kind of like invade your life. And I can't believe I'm blanking, but they like it's like subtle, cunning, baffling, powerful.
Yeah.
There we go. Right. That's it. It's 12 steps telling on themselves in those words. It is cunning, baffling, and powerful to try to wake the fuck up from that paradigm.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could talk about this for another 20 hours. It's just always amazing. Like, once you make it to the other side, it's a whole different world. It's like, I sometimes I see it and I'm like, how did I fall for this? Like, how was I like, this is it? This is how I'm going to live my life for the rest of my life. This makes so much sense that I'm going to stop shooting heroin now and do this for the rest of my life, you know?
I think that's one of the because you're so vulnerable. Like when
Yeah.
you are at that point, like I would have been willing to believe like damn near anything, especially given the lack of options presented to me, you know, and like
Yeah.
just a lack of overall education that does exist. Like, of course, why not? Like, why wouldn't you? Like a shot at like not dying, you know, and you
Sounds
do
pretty
see
good.
people that are well to do, right? And like that seemingly have like figured it out to a certain degree or another, Like, nah, I was, yeah, of course we're gonna latch onto that like with our entire body because we're lost. And
Right.
that's why that is why it's so predatory, is because it is such a vulnerable population. When you are at the depths of your addiction and at that bottom, like there is not too many things that I probably wouldn't have believed in if like you told me it would get me out of that place.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, shoot, I was willing to believe the drug would do it every single time to a certain degree or another, right? And it would actively make those choices surrounding it. So there wasn't too many things I wasn't willing to consider,
Yeah.
you know? But
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, do you want to tell people I can't talk. Can you want to tell people where they can find you if they
oh,
want to
they
see more of you? I'm gonna
absolutely.
link it too.
Yes, on TikTok. I don't even know my name on TikTok, to be completely honest. I'm looking that shit up. See how ill prepared I am for. Oh, it's literally just my name at Gil_Gibbs.
Perfect.
Well, yes, on TikTok you can find me. Eventually, other social media when I maybe start taking this a little bit more seriously.
Awesome. And then I will also have a link to where you can just click the link and go to your TikTok as well. But all
Beautiful.
right, everybody, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.